So once again, to bring attention to the idea of a book series, Ruggero, um, as the series aims to foreground spirituality as a dynamic reapproachment of revelation across generations, what kind of contributions or methodologies are you particularly looking for that capture contemporary expressions of Muslim piety while remaining rooted in the tradition? So, with a vision of the future of the series, so to speak.
Yeah, we have been talking about prophecy and as a research field in Islamic studies, and I think that one inspiration also of the series concept was the work of William Graham, who has written on transmission, of the importance of transmission, what you call the Isnad paradigm of Islam is something which is specific for Islam, the sense of connectivity. The Islamic community always upholds and actualizes the connection to the prophetic time and to the prophet himself. And this is what the Isnad is about, the Silsila is about. So religious authority is always based and constructed in this way. And also we have the Shabbat, for example. So we have different types of connectivity to the prophetic origin of Islam. So this is one point. And he made, I think, was really important, which hasn't been considered so much after research. But another point which concerns more the question you raised is his analysis in his studies on Hadith Qudsi, divine sayings, which is quite interesting because he tried to understand the Islamic concept of revelation in early Islam through this type of text. The Hadith Qudsi, as you know, is not the Quran, okay, but it's not a usual Hadith because the lafz, so the wording is by the Prophet himself, but the meaning, al-ma'ana, is inspired by God directly. So in difference to the Quran, where the wording and the meaning are considered to be revealed directly by God, and the Hadith being the mana and the lafz by the Prophet, but always inspired, of course. So through this studying this particular type of text, he tried to understand how revelation, okay, has been understood and lived also by the first generations of Muslims. And to resume it a little bit, he described it as the revelatory prophetic event, which is really the foundational moment, let's say. It's not a moment because, of course, it's 23 years of history. But the fact that, first of all, it's an event. It's not just a text which came down from the sky and somebody found it and said, well, this is the Quran, we believe in it. So, but
it's event.
Exactly. So something happened and a divine intervention. Okay, this is how revelation was lived. It's not just an instructional conception of revelation. So, revelation is a sort of instruction you read and a guide to paradise. Okay, but it was more like an event of divine intervention, and prophecy and revelation both are together. They're not separate realities, let's say, or phenomena. So you don't have the Quran on the one side and the Prophet on the other, but revelation was experienced as something which is prophecy and revelation together, okay, as a form of event. And so from this perspective, Muslim history is always the attempt to actualize this event and to make it accessible to each generation of Muslims, so that it's not just something historical, okay, that has been, okay, there was this figure which came in the 7th century in Arabia, and no, it's something which is still lived, okay, still accessible to every generation of Muslims, and this is what transmission is actually about, okay. Transmission is not just handing over a text, but is that prophecy is something present still in the communities, and from here you can of course develop different aspects: the question of religious authority, the question of spirituality, which is more what we are interested in. So how this event is continually under different conditions, cultural and historical and social conditions, reactualized and lived. And I think that this is, of course, an important issue for today, for Islam in Europe as well, okay, because the conditions are, of course, very different, okay, from the condition in which Islam emerged and articulated itself, as a form of doctrines, of practices, of cultures, etc. Um, so this is somehow the basic, let's say, idea. And then regarding the question of methodologies, Francesco said, as he said, I mean, that's a historical view, of course, of this, of studying the history of this transmission, analyzing it. I mean, we have all in our PhDs worked to actually from this historical perspective. So we have classical philology, okay, so we had some studies for some volumes doing this. But then, coming to the question you raised before, we have in Islamic theology actually interesting approaches which haven't been exploited yet in Islamic studies, and it's really astonishing. If you take the example of Hadith, for example, I mean, you find so many books like the theology of the New Testament, for example. So, what theological conceptions, are to be found in the four Gospels, for example? Okay, what you don't have anything on Hadith. Just for example, I mean, this is such a basic thing. Okay, it is for students. Okay, what does the Hadith actually say about the divine, about eschatology? There's no introduction, into themes of Hadith or the theological, conceptions. Just one example, and there are many, many other examples like this.
I can think of a number of post-colonial answers as to what
Exactly.
the reason.
Exactly.
For
So
that.
I think there are reasons.
That's another conversation.
Exactly. You can explain this gap, I think. And then you have also, let's mention practical theology, for example, okay, where you look into pedagogics, didactics, how to teach Hadith.
Pastoral care.
Yes, in a certain point. In which way, for example, Hadith can be, a source for teaching, as a narrative text, for example, as a text which functions actually like a testimony and not like a historical document. It's not a historiography, the Hadith. It's a testimony of faith. Okay, somebody witnesses the prophetic event, the meeting with the prophet, and witnesses this, and this witness is transmitted, and etc. So there's a whole dynamics, for example, for didactics or Seelsorge, how do you say Seelsorge? Chaplaincy, for example, etc., where Hadith also play a role. So these are whole new questions, interrogations, and methodologies which academic Islamic theology can contribute to our scientific understanding of prophecy, transmission, and spirituality in Islam. Because this is actually finally our aim. Okay, we want to understand what this is, okay, what this means, how it works, etc., etc.
Thank you.